You want to cover that real quick? Let's talk about them apples. We all start from...
Oh boy, do I want to talk about it. So, we're all starting as one cell, right? What are cells made of? Tissue. What is tissue made of? Molecules. What are molecules made of? Elements. What are elements made of? Protons and electrons. A positive and a negative. Now, go with me on this. Here's your clock. But here's what you missed that was right in front of you. Okay? 3, 6, 9. 1 and 2 make 3. Okay? 1 and 8 make 9. 7 and 2 make 9. 5 and 1 make 6. 4 and 1 and 1 make 6. 3 plus 9 is 12. 9 minus 3 is 6. Again, the negative. But there's a nice flat plane right in between. You also happen to have your 3 and your 6 there. And your 9. Right? But you know what that reminds me of? What hydrogen gas would look like if it were suspended? Like that. Alright? And in between all of these connecting points, right? That they're being suspended, they would suspend themselves indefinitely in that way. Unless something acted upon them, which is something that we see all the time through the observer effect. Which means that there had to be an observer, so God exists. Let's just breeze past that. But if you were to collapse this void and bring all of these together, what would that look like? Oh, that would look like helium. Periodic table, hydrogen, helium, lithium, boron. But you notice that those numbers are also counting in Fibonacci? You never noticed that? You know what the ratio between those numbers in the Fibonacci sequence are? That's the golden ratio. That's phi, 1.618. I also want to point out that 8 and 4 make 12, 7 and 5 make 12, 10 and 2 makes 12, 11 and 1 makes 12, but also 1 and 2 makes 3, 1 and 1 makes 3. Yep. Looks awful familiar. But this is the thing. Positive and negative. What's there in between? It creates a nice flat plane of existence surrounded by a toroidal field. Positive, negative, proton, electron. Okay. They look awful familiar. But yeah, when that void collapses and that collapses into helium, helium can't stay suspended by that. It has to fall. The fall of atom. And that's because of density. Now let's talk about what we actually observe too, because galaxies, they spiral out in a flat plane. What do we see nuclear fusion creating? Oh, light. That's right. You ever see light go through a prism? Because when it's like a straight prism or a triangular prism, it comes out in a straight line or a triangular rainbow. But when we see light shining through water, what shape do we see? A rainbow with a flat plane below it. Meaning that there has to be some kind of dome, some kind of firmament, if you will. Because if we were to imagine this field, that creates a total enclosed system. You ever heard of the Van Allen belts? Yeah, they seal in everything around the Earth. And if hydrogen is less dense, it would rise, yes? Which is what we observe in our atmosphere. Now we can observe that they are the same. And all those elements pushing up and creating bigger pressure waves on that hydrogen would cause it to rise, right? And if there's no more room, it starts to gather and condense. It hits that barrier and has nowhere else to go. Nothing is ever created or destroyed, right? So nothing is ever created or destroyed, it just changes states. That's a description of a closed system, completely enclosed. Because if not, this negative would just shoot off, and that positive would just shoot off, they would lose all their energy and they would die. So there must be a way to show how those things interact, right? There has to be a way that those things just change states, and how those states will change based on the mathematics and based on the physics. And if hydrogen makes up 75% of the observable universe, 24% is helium, and the other 1% is everything else like science tells us. And we're all sitting in this field of hydrogen, primarily, that's converted into different states of heavier elements, but ultimately, it's all still this same field, this same structure. You know what scientists used to call that? They used to call that the ether. Because the higher that you get from that flat plane, the more positive energy is rising. And that's what we see in our atmosphere. Now let's come back to the 369 real quick for you, bud. This is 1 unit divided into 2 units that create a third and total unit. You know what that looks like if you were to turn it sideways? A 3. A little bit, yeah. Where do we see those 3s and 1s and all those? And when enough of these elements and things combined, they create molecules, like water would be the first major molecule. Because oxygen creates a balance with hydrogen, and they love to pair up. So water had to come first. Now, water always finds its level. It always finds its level. If it were to flow around a sphere, it ripples all the way down, it flows down, and it gets to the bottom, and it stops. If this ball were spinning super, super fast, all that water would fly off. Tesla also said think about everything as wave, vibration, and frequency. Because in this scenario, energy doesn't want to follow a direct path, it wants to follow an arc. And when that arc moves back and forth or expands and contracts as it's moving, that electron cloud as it's moving around, it creates a frequency, a sound, a vibration. That's called Planck's constant. When it comes to hydrogen, I should say. That's what Nikola Tesla also discovered, was the sound, the frequency, and the vibration of hydrogen, Planck's constant. And let's just, for sake of argument, say that all that matter has gathered into the center, right? Like we've seen in this, right? It all gathers into the center. But that is mass, and that's positive and negative energy, especially combined into one place. That creates a much louder frequency. That creates much bigger pressure waves. That creates more positive and more negative vibrations. That's what gravity actually is. It's electric. And if it's electric, it's magnetic. And if it's magnetic, there's positive and negative. And if it's positive and negative, there's a flat plane in between the positive and the negative. So in a completely enclosed system, all of that helium would start to gather at the bottom, and all the hydrogen would start to gather at the top. And guess what? There would eventually be a flat plane in between. And then you'd have a 2 and a 1 with nowhere else to go. Where do we see that 2 and 1 again? Oh, I remember. Right here. And then 2 and 1 make 3. Yeah? And now you have 3 and 2 that make 5. But you've still got that 1 that's hanging out because it's everywhere. So you'd start to see multiple layers within that plane. And where those layers meet, you'd have new combinations. Okay? Those combinations build up and down, not around and out. Because again, it's an enclosed system. And again, none of that could have changed if there wasn't something that acted upon it. And when God spoke and said, "Let there be light," he spoke. That's a frequency. That's a sound. That changes wave function. And if you were to collapse all of this matter, all of it, because these are 2, right? All of it into that, it would be really big and really dense, right? But that also could be a description of the Big Bang, where all matter was contained into one point and then exploded outward in massive combinations of light, which is made from nuclear fusion or the combination of elements. But without that sound, hydrogen would stay completely suspended, perfectly aligning itself, and those frequencies would cancel each other out. They would bounce off of each other and keep each other suspended in that way. That's exactly what we see with gases. And that is your proof of God. That's your proof of a flat Earth, which they only started teaching around Earth within the last 100 years. And hopefully that sheds a little bit more truth to the lies and follow for more mind-bending content.